What's all of us in the space have to understand is that at the center of measurement is human behavior, right? We're
Yeah.
trying to change behavior as marketers. We're trying to put a creative or a piece of media in front of our audience and asking them for the money. Essentially, we're trying to change people's minds. I worked with the longest. Laser Away is a multi-location aesthetic dermatology brand. I've been working with them for many years now. They used MMM and incrementality testing along with UTM and last click attribution. We triangulated all of that and we found significant insights. What we found is that in the specific use case for them is they had saturated lower funnel channels.
You are listening to Full Funnel.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Full Funnel Podcast. I'm Rohit, your resident marketing guide. And today we're tackling one of the biggest misconceptions in marketing measurement, which is the idea that a single attribution method can answer all your questions, right? My guest is Madan Bharadwaj. He's built 4 attribution startups, advises Fortune 500 brands, and now leads Squared, a marketing measurement consultancy that essentially helps you improve your measurement. In short, if your marketing mix model, incrementality tests, or attribution numbers tells conflicting stories, Madan says that's good because that's where the truth lives, right? So Madan, awesome to have you here. Quick icebreaker before we dive in. Please introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a bit about your background and what got you to this part of your journey.
Thank you so much, Rohit. It was really nice of you to have me on the pod. It's been fun watching you guys sort of evolve and grow your approach as well. So my name is Madan. I call myself Madan from the American audience, and Madan if you're from the Asian part of the planet. I sort of as you were talking about, unfortunately, I'm a one-trick pony. The only thing I know is attribution. I've been doing attribution for some 17, 18 years now, about 4 startups in different sort of, originally got into multi-touch attribution in 2007 or 8 inside an agency called, now it's called Denso. Then I went out to start, be the founding team for a company called Visual IQ, one of the OGs in multi-touch attribution. Then I did a couple of things and I sort of founded a company called Measured, an incrementality testing company. So now I do Squared, which is a bespoke advanced attribution consultancy. And the real founding thesis of this particular brand is that there's no one size fits all. At least I strongly come to believe that having done 1,000 of these attribution projects, there's no one size fits all. As you get closer and closer to a brand, you might have 2 DTC brands, exactly identical. You might say, hey, this is the DTC brands, fashion, they're very similar. But as you get close, what you find is that the actual go-to-market challenge they're grappling with might be very different. One brand may be really focused on performance marketing, and they say, okay, all I care about is Facebook, broad audiences, and non-branded search. You have to figure out to solve that, measure that to scale. And then you go to a startup that's right next door, and you might find that they are taking a very different go-to-market that's influencer-led, right? And they have to figure out branding and sort of a more upper funnel channels for them to scale, right? Now, DTC fashion looks identical, but the go-to-market challenges are very different. So it's not possible to copy and paste. You can't like take the same MMM or the same testing approach and copy and paste here. And that's what I focus on. I focus on helping craft measurement approaches that are bespoke, that actually wrap the business challenges, the go-to-market challenges brands are grappling with, and giving them the alpha they need right now for the challenges they're grappling with to find growth and scale for their brand. So long story short, I'm a one-trick pony. All I know is attribution.
Awesome. It's great to hear some of the stories. I mean, you've been in the trenches since the beginning of attribution, essentially, right? Obviously, the measurement happened much before that, but attribution itself kind of took us to where we are today. So let's take a step back in time, right? Can you tell us a little bit about a specific situation that essentially proved that what everyone was looking at was essentially wrong, right? And also that whole no single method could tell the whole story. Could you tell us a bit about that situation?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, I've been doing this, working on attribution for many, many, many years. I've had a good fortune of working with large brands, small brands, mid-market brands and whatnot. What's all of us in the space have to understand is that at the center of measurement is human behavior. Right? We're trying to change behavior as marketers. We're trying to put a creative or a piece of media in front of our audience and asking them for their money, right? Essentially, we're trying to change people's minds. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, changing people's hearts and minds is probably the hardest thing that we can do as human beings, right? We're changing
100%.
somebody's mind is super hard, and that's what we're doing for a living. Now, take that as the fundamental underlying understanding of the system we are working with. Now, if you're trying to understand human behavior, if you measure it using or understand it using a marketing mix model,
Yeah.
or through a series of incrementality tests, or you do surveys, post-purchase surveys, or you do
Yeah.
brand list surveys, or whatever it is, the underlying phenomena is fairly complex, right? And
Absolutely.
there's no real single truth, because if you get closer and closer, it's going to be it's going to be sort of a an area of truth, but it's not a perfect sort of. There's no crispy equal to MC squared we're going to find in social sciences. Right? It's harder. And therefore, we find that very often the method that we use to measure performance of a particular channel or whatever it's phenomena we're trying to measure, a marketing execution tactic, channel, campaign program, you will get meaningfully different reads. Now, the most obvious is last click measurement. If you look at UTM attribution and platform attribution, if you look at Facebook's performance on Google Analytics, you look at Facebook's performance from Facebook,
Yeah.
chalk and cheese, right? Facebook will say my ROAS is like 5.5. UTM
Yeah.
say like zero point 0.5. I'm like, how can he? Clearly something is broken. First thing you say. Then you might use an MMM and to say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to estimate performance. And it might say, oh, ROAS is actually 2.3. Okay,
Yeah.
let me validate that. When test comes back with 1.3, like,
Yeah.
whoa. I mean, how do I use this numbers meaningfully? This whole space is like a lot of noise.
Yeah.
This happens every day.
Every
Okay,
day. Yeah.
because there are so many dimensions to performance, right? And
Yeah.
if you're using an
Way too
MMM,
many variables. Yeah.
so many, right? MMM is an averaging machine. It takes an
Mm.
average performance over multiple years, maybe. Geo-test or an incrementality test a point in time performance. And so there is variety of the factors. Maybe it's market specific, channel specific, or time specific and whatnot. So anyway, long story short,
Yeah.
I used to do these tests all the time, and
Yeah.
I've spent countless hours pouring through these results and trying to reconcile them. What's wrong? Is it the markets? Is it the reads? Is it the algorithms? Probably like aged like 100 years in the process. I mean, inside I'm an old man actually. So because of that, and there was actually a lady that I really respect. Her name is Laura Jakovsky. She used to be the CMO and then CEO of a brand called Textile. I was
Okay.
explaining my startup to her, and I said, "Hey, I'm trying to understand the true source of truth for marketing management." She's like, "No real source of truth, man. I really triangulate. I mean, you might give me a read. I have an intuition for the business. I look at multiple sources, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to make one decision with it, right?" And then light bulb went off for me. I'm like, "Oh, that's the real answer. The real answer
Right.
is that you're really focused on a decision, not the
Yeah.
measurement. Measurement is just a decision support tool. And
Absolutely.
when you think of it as decision support, you can take very disparate reads from incrementality testing, MMM, last click, and then point to one decision. Still
Yes.
make one very strong investment decision, either scale or cut or hold or whatnot.
Yes.
But trying to get a perfect understanding of the world is a fool's errand, right? So
Yeah.
I kind of that clicked for me when she said that, and then I eventually kind of went on to shape a methodology called triangulation, which is
Hmm.
to have a formal framework to synthesize multiple disparate reads
Right.
into one investment decision. Okay, and
Right.
now we've been doing this many years, and now I'm finding out that the only way to truly make investment decisions is to triangulate. And I'm sure you have this experience as well. Many marketers will be inside a board meeting or inside an important sort of executive level, C-level meeting, where they're proposing an AOP, an annual operating plan, or a budget for the next quarter, or the next or H2 or H1 or whatever, and they have a spreadsheet with 1,000 different cuts and whatnot, and somebody makes one comment, like, oh, you
Yeah.
know what, that post-purchase survey that we had last quarter, this
Yes.
said this, right? The organic was this, paid was this. You're saying organic is that, paid is that. Maybe this thing is, I'm not sure this is right. That's it.
Yeah.
The whole plan just collapses right there in the one comment because you didn't synthesize that understanding. Like if you
Yeah.
triangulate it, you would have forced yourself to say, what are the other pieces of insight or
Yeah.
reads or information we have about channel efficiency?
Hmm.
Let's bring it together. Let's reason about it. Why does post-purchase survey say blah, whereas your MMM says blue,
Yeah.
and how do you reconcile it, synthesize it? So it forces you through a process where you ask those questions along the way, And therefore, when you present an investment decision in a thesis, it is more airtight, it's more solid. And if that question comes up, you can handle it, and you can actually push through business cases in important meetings, right? I mean, I
Awesome.
learned this the hard way. So many times you get punched in the face, and
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, there must be a better way, and we evolved it over many, many years.
Yeah, I think that decision making framework, I think, is where it often gets stuck because every organization has its different person making the call and they all think differently, and it's getting everyone on the same page is a nightmare, right? So maybe let's dig a little deeper on what you just told us about your process and your framework. Can you walk us through this triangulation framework? Like how do you use MMM, GeoLIF, as well as then adjusting or calibrating those
Yeah,
attribution reports? How does this snap all together in a single decision loop, right? Without
right.
turning into more analysis paralysis.
That's what it looks like when you first start. What you find is that it feels like a wall of numbers and
Yeah.
pretty mind-numbingly complex. But if you kind of learn the process, it gets easier and easier over time. When you think of decision making,
Yeah.
the way we kind of set this up with most of the brands we work with is that when you think of advanced attribution or causal attribution or incrementality measurement, think of it as two streams of work. One is causal studies. Causal studies are you run a test, an incrementality test. That's a causal study. You cut a new model. That's a causal study. You
Yeah.
run a post-purchase survey, you cut a read from the post-purchase survey. That's a causal study. Maybe
Yeah.
you take a brand lift survey. Well, that's a causal study. Okay, those are all
Okay.
studies, and those studies are always going to be bespoke
Mm-hmm.
because the questions you're asking this quarter are different than the questions you ask next quarter and
Right.
then the next quarter. And the go-to-market's evolving. So naturally, the questions are evolving with it. And the challenges you have right now are very different than the challenges you had 8 months back. So those are always bespoke, okay, number
Yeah.
one. Now, what you do is every so often, at least once a year, maybe twice a year, maybe once a quarter, if you're really aggressive, you synthesize all the insights and make business decisions, investment decisions. So once a quarter, if you're aggressive, at least let's say twice a year, you take all the reads you've gotten, all the tests, all the models, and then we go through a process called triangulation, where for
Yeah.
every channel we bring in what's the last click measurement, which is the
Mm-hmm.
platform measurement, what's a UTM measurement, what's
Mm-hmm.
the incrementality tested reads we have, what is the MMM reads we have, and then
Right.
we synthesize all of that performance and come up with one ROAS number, one CPA number, one contribution number for each channel, based on which ones we have the most faith in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, along the way, we calculate something called a multiplier. We'll say, okay, what is my most trusted causal read? What is my anchor last click attribution? Is it Google Analytics? Is it like a platform attribution? And we compare one over the other and calculate a multiplier and say, oh, Facebook self reports 1,000 conversions every week. Okay, great. That's the denominator. Well, my MMM says that on an average, Facebook drives 500 conversions. 500 over 1,000 is a multiplier. So now every channel has a multiplier, an imputed multiplier. And I have for every channel all the possible reads lined side by side. Now, if I look at, the ROAS is actually 2.3.
Mm-hmm.
And my break-even ROAS is actually 1.3, given what my margins are and what I need to manage the business at. Manage the business at 1.3. Okay, 2.3 is well over 1.3. So the decision to scale into Facebook is obvious. Well, is there any reads on this line that would disagree with me?
Mm-hmm.
Does MMM say opposite? Does MMM say the actual ROAS is like zero point 0.5? Oh, wait, then we have a different decision. If MMM says 2.1 and incrementality test says 2.5, and you're managing to 1.3, the decision to actually scale investment on Facebook is obvious, right? So
Yeah.
when you think of it from a decision-making perspective, all of a sudden 8 out of 10 decisions become obvious when you think through this. And then you identify the two decisions that actually have very, very low confidence because we have opposing insights. One says
Yeah.
cut, one says scale. You're like, oh, wait, this could be challenging. We need to take more reads, maybe more tests, or find other forms of measurement that point to a particular decision, or try and understand this further and say, okay, maybe this is because incrementality test was run during a particular time when
Yeah.
the reads were weak. Maybe MMM is taking a more average view across multiple quarters. So, what is the right decision to make given the context in which I'm making the decision? Am I running campaigns that are more close to the seasonality that the incrementality test was run in? Or
Mm-hmm.
am I going back into a more common season that the MMM is more representative, right? Now, when
Yeah.
you think through each one of those decision points, you end up with more clear investment decisions. And now you are able to reconcile all this seemingly opposing points of view into one investment decision. Okay, that's
Absolutely.
basically the idea of triangulation.
Yeah, that's amazing. Definitely working in practice. And yeah, it'd be great if you can perhaps share like a case study or an example
Yeah,
where, a brand that has moved away from conventional touch-based attribution
yeah.
to triangulation, what kind of lift did they see? Like how much waste did they cut, or how much growth did they see, or profits?
There are multiple case studies. If you go to my site, there is a blog section where we post case studies all the time. Some of the brands that I've worked with for the longest, Laser Away is a multi-location aesthetic dermatology brand. I've been working with them for many years now. They used MMM and incrementality testing along with UTM and last click attribution. We triangulated all of that and we found significant insights. What we found is that specific use case for them is they had saturated lower funnel channels. Non-branded search and Facebook was really lower funnel for them, and they saturated that, and they couldn't scale the business any further. They had to go find alpha and growth in the middle funnel, upper funnel. So they did a lot of CTV work, a lot of more social, paid social, but further up the funnel they did a lot of TikTok and Snap and whatnot.
Yeah.
But nothing was picking up. If you looked at UTM attribution, they all look like shit, right? So the CMO all was struggling to find signal to say any one of these actually worked. So we built models for him, marketing mix models for him, and it popped for him and said, "Oh wow, look at streaming channels. All CTV and streaming channels are like popping really strongly for you."
Yeah.
And I went back to him and said, "Great, we got some signal."
Yeah.
He was like, "Well, let's validate it." So we went back and tested a series of incrementality tests to validate the reads we got from MMM. He didn't fully agree, but the direction of investment was validated. Clearly, streaming was still strongest, even though it didn't come back as strong as the MMM pointed, but it still came back much stronger than the baseline ROAS for the entire portfolio. So then we did a small test, about 5, 6 markets for each one of those different channels. Then we did a national test. We cut the country into half and half. About 100 markets or something like that, 50, 70 markets got one media mix, another 50, 70 got the base media mix. And we have sort of found about a 12% lift for the business. So that kind of is a process, like a test, learn, grow process where you can test, learn, validate your insights, and then scale, right? Test, learn, scale, execution. That is the most reliable way to scale your execution. That's Laser Away is a good example. Another good example is the Perfect Gene, which is a fashion brand, a DTC fashion brand. Similar kind of a situation. We went through a lot of measurement, mostly incrementality testing and MMM to kind of point to where the true ROAS might be for the channels. And then based on those reads, the founder doubled the investment quarter, and then the business also doubled with it, and then settled into a different clip overall. And there are plenty of examples. By now, a lot of case studies of growth. I think the recommendation I would give for most brands is that think of causal attribution or any data-driven decision making like going to the gym or eating healthy, right? You can eat healthy for a day and assume that you're going to have amazing glowing health, right? It's a process. You like do it over a period of time. Or if you go to the gym, you go over a period of 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. Without question, you're going to look better, you're going to feel better and whatnot. Same idea. You can't analyze your data for 1 week, 1 month and say that, well, I'm not finding any growth in the business. What's going on? You consistently do it for 3, 4 cycles. The results are without question are going to show up. But having the patience and the sticking with it for a period of time is easier said than done. You and I run businesses too, right? We also have a variety of different things that we're struggling to solve, and 3 quarters looks like eon away from here, right? It looks like how am I going to stick to something with 3 quarters? And tell me it's something I can work next week is what most people ask me. I'm like, I can give you some alpha for next week, but the real change is going to happen over a period of time. Consumers don't change their mind overnight; they change their minds over time, and you have to accept that as sort of the gravity in the universe we live in.
Yeah, I think we were having a conversation yesterday on the so-called performance marketers who basically optimize their campaigns every day. It's basically the same analogy you used just now, like changing your diet every day and then weighing yourself the next day and hoping something changes, right? So so let's talk a little bit about like aligning the marketing teams and finance teams, right? Which I guess
Yeah.
that's the biggest issue nowadays when you talk about, CMOs essentially having to go and beg for budget and then getting questioned and berated every time things don't turn out the way they're supposed to. Finance teams are talking about profitability, EBITDA, and all of that. And then marketers are always constantly walking into the boardroom with vanity metrics, essentially. What's your recommendation? How do you translate these model outputs or, measurement outputs to,
Yeah.
I think, what you call the incrementality adjusted P&L, which the CFO can actually trust?
That's right. Yeah. So first thing first, Rohit, we have to speak one language, right? We have to speak one language. As marketers, we have to speak the language of business. The language of
Yeah,
business, in many ways, is finance, right? We have to
yeah,
describe our efforts in ways the business describes its own performance, right?
yeah,
If we go take the way an investor would evaluate a business or a CFO would report the business, there's a very sort of a way they think about the P&L. Here
yeah,
is my top line, here is my cost, here is my COGS, here is my gross margin, contribution margin, whatnot.
hmm,
We have to describe marketing's contribution in the same terms. Okay. Now, for example, if a CMO can walk into an ELT meeting, an executive leadership team meeting, on any given Friday, and say,
hmm,
"Oh, last month we spent $1 million on TikTok, and the contribution margin was 650,000." Right? That's it. That's the whole business case. You don't have to say
yeah,
anything more.
yeah,
Now, the CFO sitting across the table is like, wow, so
yeah,
you took $1 million from me. You gave
yeah,
me back my $1 million and you put 650,000 in my pocket.
yeah,
That's amazing. Why do you want to take a million? Why don't you take like five? Right?
yeah,
That's the question he's going to ask because now the CMO looks like a good borrower from a bank. Oh, you're a great borrower. You took $1 million, you paid back in time, and you gave me interest on my $1 million. You gave me an amazing interest, about 65%.
yeah,
That's amazing. Can you just borrow more money, please? That's what the CFO is going to say. Now, that language is what we call MAF,
hmm,
Marketing Accounting Framework. Okay,
yeah,
it's basically the gap equivalent for marketing.
yeah,
You and I have been, marketing management for a long time. Marketing spend on many B2C businesses is number one and number two line item in the P&L in terms of the amount of investment you're making as a
yeah,
business. But if you look at how it gets reported,
yeah,
and if you work across like 10 brands in the same category, you'll find that everybody reports it differently, right?
yeah,
Some people report organic and paid as one line item. Like they'll, so SEO and PPC will get rolled into search, right?
yeah,
And direct will be rolled into something else. Everything gets rolled into some like way that is different in different brands. There's no standardization. So what we have come up with is this idea of a MAF, which is a standardized way to report performance in a way
yeah,
that both marketers and finance actually can speak the same language. So again, I picked up this approach from an amazing CMO. His name is David Lokes. He
hmm,
was my client in a previous life, and
okay,
he would tell me when I go report performance. I remember I incrementality management for him. I had a full dashboard for him, and I said, "Here is the total orders, total revenue. Here is a total media spend, and here is your ROAS."
yeah,
He was standing at it for a bit, and he said, "I don't think of my business this way. Okay, for
mm,
me, my new customers are their own P&L. The way
mm,
I market to new customers and the unit economics expectations I have, the
yeah,
channels, the go to market I have to acquire new customers is entirely different than the way I market to existing customers, right? And what I'm willing to invest, what ROI I expect in return, and what
hmm,
outcomes I'm looking for. New
yeah,
customers, I'm trying to get them in the door in a profitable way. With returning customers, I'm expanding LTV. I'm trying to get them to engage me on a longer term basis and keep making me as a part of their business operations or their lives. And then I
yeah,
have these big pool of customers who churned on me many times, many years back. I can possibly go and reacquire them much cheaper than acquiring new customers from the market. So I'm always trying to figure out how I can. So these are all three different P&Ls for me, right? And I have very different expectations and unit economics for each one of those. And when I report to my CFO, I am stacking them in a very specific way, and I'm accounting for it in a way that makes sense for the business. Because I'm saying I'm losing money on a new customer acquisition intentionally. I'm losing $15 for every customer I acquire
yeah,
because if they stick around with me, they make me $100 over eight months. So I'm
yeah,
going to make the $15 I lost in about 45 days, and then it's an ATM. Right?
yeah,
They're going to continue spending with me. I can take the profits, invest it back into new customer acquisition, create a
exactly,
flywheel in the business. Right now, I can have profits drive new customer acquisition driving profits, and now we've created a flywheel in the business. Right. So he taught me this
yeah,
idea of flywheel analysis, and then we have developed that into a formal methodology. We call it MAF. Now, this MAF, this whole idea is to structure your outcomes, business
Right.
outcomes, in a way that is natural for the business, right? So I just talked you through a retail business: new
Yeah.
customers, turning customers, turn customers, win back, right? So three different P&Ls. Now, if you go talk to a brand like Goop or some other cosmetics brand, you might find that as you get deeper in the business, they have two very different customer segments:
Yeah.
fashion and beauty. Okay, fashion is all about sort of like clothing, denim, and whatnot. Beauty is cosmetics and skincare and whatnot. And then it turns out as you get closer, you understand that they're very different businesses
Yeah.
entirely. Customers
100%.
who buy beauty are sort of like the high end customers, but the customers
Yeah.
who buy fashion from a brand, maybe they're aspirational. They want to like own a certain brand, but they cannot. They want to
Yeah.
buy the most expensive handbags, but they're not able to. So they settle for the handbag brand that's accessible, but the brand is actually like reputable, right? So this the actual underlying customer dynamics behind the purchase are very, very different, very different customer segments, and they have very different go-to markets. And now you have to build two different P&Ls and measure marketing's impact on these P&Ls differently, right? So here's a great example. That's what I call MAF, right? Another fantastic example of a multi-location brand we're working with.
Hmm.
This particular brand was born in California,
Okay.
and they grew up in California for many, many years. And then they slowly expanded to the east from California. When we started measuring, we almost always thought of measurement nationally for
Hmm.
all the entire nation. And then after we spent some time in the business, we understood that, wait, California is half the business and they've been there for a long time. It looks like all the media metrics look incredibly strong there: CPL, CPAs, ROAS, everything looks strong there. Everything looks weaker here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's been around in California for a long time. So we expect that the baseline in the business is pretty high.
Yeah.
Then what we did is we came up with an MAF that said, okay, California as one P&L, rest of the country is another P&L. We run marketing mix models against it too. Our jaws dropped. Okay, we found that the baseline in California was 75%, which
Yeah.
means if we turned off media in California, three-fourths of the business will still walk into the clinics, walk into
Yeah.
the store and buy stuff, right? Or sign up for procedures. And in Albuquerque, in all the other markets,
Hmm.
baseline was like 5%, which was
Wow.
non-existent. So media was driving 95% of the business. So if you turned off media in the rest of the country, all the clinics would go empty tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Having to understand that, and also the media mix. The media mix that
Yeah.
worked in California was more upper funnel, sort of like awareness
That's right.
and beat media.
Different
But
channels
as
and
here it
stuff.
was more full funnel execution. You had to do mid funnel, upper funnel, lower funnel. Everything had to work together.
Yeah.
Now it's opened up like the insight, opened up the go-to-market, and they could take a very different go-to-market based on CDI, BDI kind of
Right.
approaches. And this is how you get next levels of efficiency in any brand, right?
Yeah.
You can optimize, you can like tweak and tactically optimize all day long. That's okay. But if you really want to get stepwise improvements in performance, this
Yeah.
is the kind of insight that helps you do that. And this is also the way you can report the business back in a way that makes sense for finance executives,
Yeah.
right? This idea is what we call MAF, Marketing Accounting Framework, and it's been a breakthrough in helping people get insights that are truly breakthrough for their transformation.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, that's the true growth flywheel, right? But yeah, dimensions are quite crazy. What you just mentioned earlier, right? There's just so many ways to look at how to report,
That's it.
and you got to really understand the market as well. That's where experience comes into play. Now, talking about what organization kind of needs to do to get to this point, right? I mean, all of whatever you shared is amazing, right? And there's a lot to learn and a lot of upskilling as well. Can you kind of perhaps define how does that happen within the org? And what advice do you have to folks who want to upskill and kind of
Right.
change their mindset essentially, right?
I'll start in a different place. I'll
Okay.
start in a different place so they kind of it gives you a playbook. I would say that the sophistication of marketing measurement and inquiry, data-driven inquiry,
Yeah.
changes as your brand kind of matures.
Hmm.
Now, if you're a really young brand, imagine you're a brand that's year old, you're less than $1 million in GMV,
Yeah.
spending probably like $10,000, $20,000 a month.
Hmm.
Honestly, you don't need advanced measurement. Last click measurement is plenty. Or you're struggling to drive demand, you're constantly trying to figure out what is the right
Yeah.
messaging, go to market, who's the right audience and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you can use simple Facebook attribution. You can use Google Analytics,
That's right.
and it's plenty of signal. The only thing you
Measurement
might
is least of your problem.
at least if your problems. You have a demand problem. You have to
Yeah.
figure out demand measurement is not your problem.
Creative
Any
problem.
demand you
Yeah.
see is incremental, right? Any demand you see is incremental. So it's good. Then once you get to a particular stage, about maybe $3-4 million in GMV, what happens is that the two primary last click measurements you might have, platform attribution and UTM, Google Analytics or UTM attribution, will start kind of diverging from each other. One will say one thing, another will say another thing because of a variety of different things. Taxonomy, more repeat customers, and all this stuff, they don't agree with each other. There, what we recommend typically is to add post-purchase surveys. Now, post-purchase surveys are like when you finish, somebody finishes the checkout, you ask them, hey, where'd you hear about us? Right? It turns out that it's kind of poor man's incrementality. It's an okay approximation of what is a true causal driver for this particular this transaction. You're asking the customer, where do you remember me from? And whatever they remember in the moment is not a bad proxy for incrementality. It doesn't always work perfectly. It doesn't work as much for Google channels as it does for Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and whatnot, radio, and it actually works for podcasts and radio quite well. Kind of some channels it pops, some other channels it does a poor job. Search, nobody remembers searching for something, and I'm just giving you anecdotal insights. Okay, so now you get there for a bit, and then you kind of travel a little further. Now you're $5-10 million. The post-purchase survey is not good enough for you. You have a lot of campaigns. It cannot give you campaign level insights. You get a little further. You run incrementality tests. Maybe your platform lift study. You do that for a bit. Then you say, well, platform lift study is a little wonky. It's all sort of opaque. I need a geo test to kind of get more high integrity incrementality insights. Start running geo tests. Now that takes you a little further. Then you kind of get a lot of channels now. There's too many tests to run. It gets too messy. You start running marketing mix models to get more generic insights across the portfolio. And then you kind of keep evolving that over a period of time. And then you somewhere along the line here is when you start introducing a proper marketing accounting framework. Right. New versus repeat customers, high LTV, low LTV customers, product A, product B, or upper funnel outcomes, mid funnel outcomes, lower funnel outcomes, and whatnot. But exactly how you define the measurement, why you define it that way, how is the go-to-market aligned to that? Those are all questions you can answer along the way, and that's a natural evolution of the business. So this is sort of, if you think about it, you don't have to eat the elephant in one bite. It's a process. You just have to stack up the sophistication to line up to where the business is and its evolution. If you're kind of too far behind, you're not servicing the business. If you're too far ahead, you will collapse on its own weight. The whole framework will collapse on its whole weight because there's too much. The juice is not worth the squeeze. If you can do something in 10 minutes, as all these studies are going to take like 3 weeks, small brand, you simply cannot afford that, right? As
a practical application. Yeah.
That's the starting sort of advice I'd give. In terms of education and training, I would say literacy is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like having just overall literacy about marketing, like the CFO not having basic literacy on marketing metrics. Yeah. What is UTM attribution? If they keep saying, I don't want to do forecasts using causal metrics, I want to go back to using Google Analytics metrics, and you'll keep missing the forecast. Right? You can go back and fire the CMO 4 times and get new CMOs. But if you force the process that, hey, we need to do forecast based on Google Analytics reporting,
that's right.
You're tying your CMO's hand behind his back and saying, hey, you got to play with your hands tied behind the back. You're forcing an inefficient execution, right? Yeah. So literacy, having some basic literacy on advanced measurement, decision making, some basic marketing metrics is going to go a long way. So, and also creates the same language. You speak financial language, they can abridge and understand how finance and marketing bridge, what are the right metrics to look at. It goes a long way. So my recommendation, I run a class, I'm sure we teach all these techniques in a master class in advanced attribution.
Yeah.
My recommendation always is that just bring your finance partners to the class. Yeah. Let them also sit with you in the class. They may not understand or appreciate all of it, but now it creates a common language. When you say the word multiplier, it doesn't sound like some alien concept. When you say the word marketing mix modeling, it doesn't sound like some magic beans, right? Now, the foundations of why Google Analytics attribution is fundamentally flawed, and you need to adjust it for causality, and you need to use causally adjusted metrics for planning. It doesn't feel like some gobbledygook
exactly.
Voodoo science. It feels like it's well founded in good science, and it's well founded in real applications and whatnot. Right. Now you can begin to put the pieces in place for transforming the organization towards data-driven decisioning. So
100%.
You don't even have to be an expert. just
Yeah.
literacy can be a game changer for many
Yeah, I like
organizations.
that. I like that. The both ways, right? Finance knowing what marketing does and marketing having more finance literacy as well, right? Yeah, that's going to really help. Awesome. Final question. AI is coming into the world with agents and all of this good stuff. They're creeping into every facet of marketing.
Yes.
Where do you see it going in the measurement side of things? If it ever
Yes.
happens, and which judgments you think are still must be
Yeah.
human based.
As I'm sure you follow the space closely as well, Rohit. I'm going to reference an amazing MIT discussion on causality by
Okay.
a bunch of professors who do research in the space. It's on YouTube. Anybody can look it up.
Mhm.
Susan Athy, there's another professor named Sridhar something, and two other
Okay.
professors in MIT. They all had a discussion about causality, very sort of
Mhm.
elevated discussion. All these people are doing research in causality, and the crux of it is that most of the data that we have out there that AI is trained on
Yeah.
is correlational data. Like
Yeah.
I'm sure if you give AI, you pull a Google Analytics report and say,
Yeah.
AI, here is my Google Analytics source medium report.
Yeah.
Make a forecast for me. It'll happily make a forecast where it says, spend all your money on SEO, right? Of course, it's going to say that. Well, that's the data it has to work with. So the causal measurement,
Yeah.
there isn't a lot of causal data percolated in the world we live in for AI
Absolutely.
to truly make causal decisions, or decisions
Yeah.
based on causality, right? It has correlational data. Only the most of the data it has access to, it can work with, is all
Yeah.
correlational. And the context for causality is very splintered and sort of like not very well tailored, right?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the brands I work with, I'm sure you work with, we're all laying down the foundations for like causal data. The
Yeah.
infrastructure for collecting and using causal data is being laid down right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, once you lay it down, what AI is going to be very, very good at is that you can throw a big decomposition report at it that has like 50,000 rows,
Yeah.
dimensions, and say, hey, find me some insights. It can chop the data 15 different ways and throw 15 insights at you or 500 insights at you. You
Yeah.
can now pick and curate the three insights that now you can sit on top of all of that, like processing, and you
Yeah.
can now guide the ship. Now you can be the pilot inside a Boeing 747, like guiding the ship towards, guiding the plane towards where you need to go. So you can travel further, faster. You can get to much more exciting places than you were ever able to. But you have to be a pilot who knows how to drive a 747 too. So you need to have the literacy and the understanding of how an airplane works and all the
Yeah.
aerodynamics and the flight controls. I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise it's going to run you right into the into the ground. But once you learn what this is about and how to use it, it's going to be a brave new world for us.
Yeah.
And the way I sometimes describe it to the folks I talk to is that all insights that are possible,
Hmm.
there's a future where causality is everywhere. We understand
Yeah.
causal measurement, right?
That's right.
And then we'll be living in what is called the Pareto frontier. Every
Hmm.
decision we make, we're always super efficient. We know exactly what to expect from the
Yeah.
investments we're making, and those insights are all as understood as they can be. And we're
Yeah.
constantly making investments on the efficient frontier, which is like on the what's called the Pareto frontier in quantitative finance. Now, the
Yeah.
only thing that will be left is the mystery of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
How can I anything that you don't know, that you
Yeah.
can only learn by coming up with a hypothesis and testing it. That's
Yeah.
the only unknowns. All the knowns will be like flattened out. We'll be using it for investment optimization and constantly we'll be on that. Now it'll
Yeah.
be the mystery of, can I poke the human beings this way? What would happen if I say something like shocking? Will they like be
Yeah.
turned off or they'll be like excited? What will happen? That we don't know. The answer that we don't know is the only thing that will be the mystery. The rest of it will all be known and what it will be used. So that's my
Yeah.
AI future that a lot of us are, including you, are building together.
Indeed, indeed. Awesome, man. I think that was amazing conversation. That's a wrap for this edition of the Full Funnel podcast. Madan, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your framework and sharing all of your knowledge on the measurement space. To everyone listening, if you found this conversation interesting, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share this with a teammate who's struggling with their measurement, right? Also, please follow Madan on LinkedIn. He shares a lot of great stuff. Also, if you're looking to learn, check out his measurement training to upskill itself. Highly recommended. Everyone at LifeSite has done it as well. And we'll be back next week with another guest pushing the boundaries of growth. Until then, keep testing, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next full funnel. Thanks, Madan.
Thank you so much for having me, and everybody, thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.